Bismillah, alhamdulillah, Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. In the name of God, ask for peace and blessings upon Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his family and companions, and all of those who follow him. So we talked about the idea of a noble believer noticing positive in others, and the hypocrite noticing misdeeds and faults. And I think it's important to root this in the statement of Raghib al-Asfahani, rahmatullahi alayh, who again said that when you see fault in others, that fault is in you, either manifest or latent, like fire is latent in flint. And so this has to do with the idea of projection or transference of things happening within oneself and projecting them onto other people. And that's something that we should always be aware of. And when we see fault in other people, that we might well be projecting things from ourselves onto them. And so if we apply the principle that we just went over, first examining your own condition, and second realizing that you're never going to find people that are perfect, and then again erring on the assumption that you might be projecting, it's just a good way to be more cautious and as we begin to try to be discerning in our dealing with people. The poet said, "Man dha alladhi tarda sajayahu kulluha kafa bil mar'i nublan an tu'adda ma'ayibuh." Who is it that has no fault at all? It's enough for a person to be considered noble that their blemishes can be counted. In other words, if we were to think about ourselves and say, I know I have these 5 or 10 or 8 issues that I have, that's an honor that you can at least count them, because we all have faults and nobody is perfect except for God. And so he mentions here then that just as you hold your tongue from mentioning a brother's misdeeds, you should also observe the same silence in your heart. This is on page 38. And this is where we can take a look at the idea of ghiba of the heart. Just as there is backbiting of the tongue, where if you say about a person verbally that which would dismay them if they heard it, is considered backbiting. And we should distinguish backbiting from slander. Backbiting is when you say something that is true, but if they heard it, it would bother them. That's backbiting. So, the person has X thing, whatever. The person has an abnormally large head. So you say, oh, he's got a big head, and he knows he's got a big head. But if you said that in front of people, if he heard you say that, that would bother him. That's called ghiba. And that's where Allah says, would one of you like to eat the flesh of the dead flesh of your brother? فَكَرِهْتُمُوهُ. Nay, you despise it. So backbiting is when you say things that are true. Slander is when you say things that are not true. So you say something about them that isn't true, that was not actually factual, and the Prophet ﷺ said that person would not enter paradise. A namam, someone who slanders people, say things that are not true. What he's talking about here is the next level down, which is where your heart is actually silent from speaking ill of them. And Imam Al-Ghazali talks about the marvels of the heart, the idea of being able to silence the heart. I think that there's an intersection there between the idea of mindfulness and heartfulness. In other words, like looking at, can we actually observe enough silence or enough equanimity or objectivity about our thought process to be able to begin silencing it somewhat? Because we're often thinking things all the time. There's this constant kind of thought. So when another person comes up, you do your assessment of them, and then you've got this litany of what? Presumptions about them. So you just say they're this, they're that, they're this, they're that. Well, it's one thing to mention the fault with the tongue, but what he's saying is actually silence the heart. To become non-judgmental, or to not be slanderous, or to kind of minimize the person even at a heart level. And that takes a lot of work. That's not just going to happen, overnight. You have to actually begin working on it. May Allah make that easy for us. I've probably shared a story with you all before. Micah Anderson, one of our teachers here, and myself were teaching a workshop in Edmonton, Canada. And after the workshop, we went out to lunch. And they took us to this halal restaurant. And the brother who was with us, we stood in line and we're getting ready to order. And a guy came in. And when he came in, I sized him up. And in T-minus 10 seconds, I knew exactly what group he was from and who he was and so on and so forth. And we just got done teaching a workshop on what? Cultivating a non-judgmental attitude. So I felt like a hypocrite, obviously, because he walked in and he had kind of a scruffy beard, and he had like a short thobe, and he looked like a part of a particular kind of group, a bald head. He looked very blank, right? And I looked at him, and I caught myself, and I was like, oh, astaghfirullah. I didn't say anything, but in my heart, I what? I made a judgment about him, and I kind of assumed he was such and such. So I confessed to Micah because we're colleagues, and so I'm like, dude, I'm a hypocrite. Like we talk about non-judgment, and here I am like sussing this guy out. So I was like, Micah, I was like, astaghfirullah, I caught myself judging this guy. He's like, I swear I did the same thing. He goes, astaghfirullah. We're both just like, astaghfirullah, Allah forgive us. And this is a good thing about spiritual company, that you can be honest enough with to be like, yo, I totally just dropped the ball. And then this really fascinating thing happens where I was like, you know what? I'm going to actually greet the guy. That's like my way to repent from my judgment of him. I'm going to actually greet him. So I said, Assalamu alaikum. He goes, wa alaikum salam. He goes, brother Usama. He goes, what are you doing here? And I was just, my heart sunk. I was like, man. And then he goes, oh, I wish I knew you were in town. I was like, oh, I'm just teaching a workshop. And then he's like, oh man, it's good to see you, bro. Akhi, mashallah, it's good to see you. Like super sweet. And then I felt horrible, obviously. And then I was like, yeah, man, anytime, you're in town, come to Cali, et cetera. Then I turned away, and I was like, I felt bad and whatever. So then we had ordered our food, and we go to sit down waiting for our food. The brother who I judged leaves. Then our host brings our food and sets it down on the table. And he says to me, do you guys know that guy? I'm like, no, I just met him. And he goes, it's interesting because he paid for you guys' lunch. Right? So you see the mistakes we can make, where I made this assumption about him based off of his outward appearance. And he not only he knows who I am, knows my name, I don't know his name. He has obviously a better opinion of me than I'm deserving of. And he's going to what? Pay for my lunch. But instead, I'd rather him just be the blank or the X or the Y. So part of this is about examining where does suspicion come from. And he mentions specifically, there's two ways that suspicion are formed. One is perception. It rests on some outward sign, like the aforementioned example. You see the person dressing like X or appearing like Y, so you assume Z. The second is that which arises from a prejudice against somebody, where your default is to assume the worst. You have a bad opinion of them because of a prejudice. You've prejudged them, and so you measure them based off of that prejudice. So you assume that they're like this or like that. A concept that is important to study is called the fundamental attribution error. Who knows what the fundamental attribution error is? Yes, ma'am, Laura?
Is it like where, like a person, like say of one race or religion or whatever, does one thing, so then you expect everybody of that race or religion to start doing the same thing?
That might be closer to like a generalizing, right? Where you say people from X country are all unintelligent. Why is that false? Because as soon as one person from that country you meet that is intelligent, it proved to be logically false to say that. So people from X are always Y. It's a generalization. There was a scholar from Al-Azhar who wrote a beautiful treatise on the fact that God rarely generalizes in the Quran. He will say many of them or few of them, but very rarely does Allah say kulluhum, right? Kathirun minhum, qalilun minhum, few of them, many of them. It's really true. God, most of them, a lot of them, a few of them. We say what? Oh, they all bad. So that's a different thing. What is the fundamental attribution error? It's really important that you know it because I got bad news for you. You all have it, and I have it. Basil?
So you see an attribute in someone and you generalize that attribute to their essence, so you think they're all bad.
Exactly. So you essentialize a person, and one of the ways you can see this, and you can look at practically, how can we practically examine this? Because he says one of the ways suspicion arises is from prejudice. You and I both take an exam. It's the same exam, and we both pass it. The fundamental attribution error leads me to say that I passed it. Why? I passed the exam. What do I attribute to myself? Because I'm smart. I worked hard. Why did you pass it? No, you. I look at the other person. Because you're lucky. It was easy. You know what I'm saying? It was an easy test. Of course you passed it. You and I both take the same exam. We both fail it. Why did I fail it? When I look at myself, why did I fail it? It was mad hard. The teacher, right, is a Zionist. It was a Zionist plot, and he knew I was half black, and so trying to always keep the black man down, whatever, right? So there's something about the text that made it what? Oh no, he's trying to pick on me. He knew that my father was such and such. I attribute it to something that what? The test was hard. But why did you fail the test? When I look at you, what do I assume about you? You ain't studied hard enough. And we have this as a fundamental error that our thinking leads. We make all kind of excuses for ourselves, but for other people we don't. The more immediately relevant way, as you alluded to, CD, was what? When I look at someone, I think of them as either all good or all bad. Right? So if someone makes a mistake, or someone does something nice for me, they buy me a candy bar. They're a nice person. They gave me a candy bar. In addition to being a giver of candy, do you think that they have any faults? Hello? Absolutely. They took my candy bar, so now they're a taker of candy. In addition to being a what? A candy thief, do I think that they have any virtue? Of course. So our tendency to think of people as either all good or all bad is actually erroneous, because we've essentialized them as either good or bad. Imam Al-Shafi'i said something very important in this regard. No Muslim will ever obey God without disobeying Him. And no Muslim will disobey God without sometimes obeying Him. So who's ever good outweighs their bad, we consider them from the Salihin. We consider them a righteous person. So the tendency to say that the brother did this or the sister did that, they're a what? Bad person. That's a mistake. So we've got to examine some of the prejudices that we carry. And if you think that you have no prejudices, then you are simply fooling yourself. May Allah Ta'ala make it easy for us. And he talks then about not spying or prying. Prying is listening to rumors, and spying in visual observation. So you know, that's why Sidi Ahmad Zaruq, one of our great scholars, said, may Allah have mercy on him, the most dangerous thing you can say is, how is so-and-so doing? Kayfa halu fulan? How is so-and-so doing? Because you're like, hey, how are they doing? You all listening? Hey, how's so-and-so doing? You hear the tone? That's very different than, hey, man, how's so-and-so? But either way, you're like, hey, man, what's up with so-and-so? You're like, you didn't hear. And then what? Here it comes. Often, the best you're going to walk away with is a bunch of completely irrelevant use information that has nothing to do with you or them or anything else. It's just what? Data that is not relevant. A lot of times, people are going to offer the what? The problematic stuff. Then you begin to develop attitudes or thinking about that person. So we got to be very careful. Be very careful. Min husni Islam al-mar'i tarkuhu ma la ya'ni. From the good of a person's Islam is their leaving that which does not concern them. And then on page 40, he talks about the statement of the Prophet ﷺ that a man's belief is incomplete so long as he does not wish for his brother what he wishes for himself. And he says something very powerful and for me very painful. The lowest degree of brotherhood is treating your brother as you'd wish to be treated. That's the lowest degree. Treating them as you'd wish to be treated. Then he talks also about rancor and envy. Hidden diseases of the inward from page 41. Rancor is a sickness. It's a spiritual malady. And you can find in Sheikh Hamza's book, Purification of the Heart, which is his commentary on Sheikh Muhammad Mawlud's Matharidul Qulub, a brilliant delineation of the spiritual maladies, their etymology, their definition, and their treatment. And according to Imam Al-Ghazali, whose book we're reading, the way to achieve spiritual wellness is to, one, understand what a sickness is, know where it comes from, and then know its treatment, and to individually and specifically address each one. Other people from the scholars of spiritual cultivation have some nuance, but generally speaking, that's the understanding that when it comes to sicknesses of the heart, you need to know what they are, what's their definition, where do they come from, and then how do you treat it. Rancor is different than anger. If you have anger, that is, if you're angry towards something that is wrong, if injustice angers you, that's a good thing. That's a good sign. Imam Al-Shafi'i said, "Man istughliba falam yaghdab fahuwa himar." Somebody who is incited and does not experience anger is nothing but a donkey. Pardon the expression. Meaning what? That they're just like a beast of the field. In other words, there are things that should anger you. Being so desensitized to where you never experience anger, that's not a good sign. When you see what's happening in the world, it should anger you. What you do with that anger is where the bread is buttered, where the rubber meets the road. You shouldn't react in a way that is obviously violent or what have you, or unjust. But rancor, bughd, is when you hate somebody and it's not justified. When you have rancor in your heart towards somebody. And it's one of the very real spiritual maladies. If you have no reason to dislike somebody. And that can come from arrogance, is one of the places that it comes from, which also can come from avarice or wantonness in the heart. How do you remedy it? If you feel rancor towards somebody, how do you remedy it? What's a way that you can practically deal with hate in your heart towards somebody? Pray for them. What's another one? Give them gifts. لِأَنَّهُ قَالَ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ تَهَادُوا تَحَابُوا. Give gifts and you will love one another. Right? And this is one of those kind of difficult moments in the Muslim community when someone gives you a gift, not because they came to visit from out of town, but what? Just randomly, they're like, Akhi, tfaddal. And there's like, I love you too, Akh, right? No, but it should be done obviously with more subtlety than that. But because when you give a gift, what happens? The heart softens and they're like, thank you, my God, you're so nice. And you're right, you feel like, right? Or making dua for them, praying for them is another way to soften the heart. If you feel, because it happens, like you're just like, subhanAllah. And these are those beautiful moments of honesty with the self to where you can be like, La ilaha illallah, subhanAllah. Like I have no reason to hate this person. I don't even know who they are, just don't like them. And creating enough honesty and transparency with the self to be able to turn toward those very painful experiences that we all could or may experience. So rancor and envy make a person desire to display the faults of others. So when you feel like if there's some reason that you needed to mention a person's faults, what would be context within which you actually needed to mention somebody's faults? Let's be clear about this, where there was a valid need to do so. Huh? Which means what?
Just like I guess you go to somebody who's an authority, it's like somebody you're pressing and they can actually fix that problem.
So there's actually somebody who has license or agency to redress a wrong. So if I'm going to the cop and I'm like, he stole my wallet, the cop can arrest him. You know what I'm saying? Depending on what neighborhood you're in. So you're actually going to seek justice. What are other cases when you might actually mention somebody's fault? We should be really clear about this, everybody. What do you mean?
It's like you're trying to get a match and then you go to someone who actually knows this person trying to get married to and they tell you.
Right. So Salwa, hypothetical Salwa, comes to me and says, hey, do you know Sa'id? Hypothetical Sa'id. And I know Sa'id, right? And she says, well, what do you know about Sa'id? And I happen to know that he's got some things he's working through. You know what I'm saying? And she's going to marry this guy. It actually be incumbent on me to mention that which is relevant to what could concern her and her marriage with him. Like the guy's got an anger management problem or he's lazy or whatever. I can't hide that from Salwa because she's going to marry this guy. And vice versa. Sa'id comes to me, he's like, hey, do you know about Salwa? I'm like, yeah, man, I really hate to say this, but such and such. Even in that case, take a minute. Ista'idh billah. Seek refuge with Allah from shaitan. Maybe step out of the room for a minute. Take a few deep breaths. Make wudu. Pray 2 rakats. Whatever you got to do to make sure you don't got nothing against Sa'id or Salwa. Because you can begin to embellish what might just be like a kind of idiosyncratic element of their nature. And you begin to what? Deconstruct it and highlight it and focus. And I know why they did it. And Sa'id is a bad person. You know what I'm saying? Know that you have the fundamental attribution error. You at least have the what? Potential to think in that way. So be careful. And what he's saying is you might have rancor or envy. The envious person will almost never admit that they're envious. I'm not trying to hate, but what does that usually mean? I'm about to hate, right? And I think haters is a really good translation for hasad. Because a lot of times people who are haters, they're just hasud. They're just envious of the person. I ain't trying to hate, but he shouldn't have that car. Sa'id should have never married Salwa. Huh? Oh, are you envious of them? What is it that's leading you to say that? Whereas if you have a proper, critical, necessity to mention something that's real, you'll know that. And you'll also say, I'm not trying to essentialize Sa'id. I'm not trying to make a character judgment essentially about him. I'm not trying to, but it's important that you know, Salwa, that Sa'id does sleep a lot. You know what I'm saying? Or does whatever. She needs to know that. Because if you don't tell her, she's not going to name her child after you. She's going to be mad at you and say, what? You knew and you didn't tell me. Other examples? So use English terms because we're in an English-speaking country.
Like when you're seeking a fatwa from a scholar,
okay,
and you want to know about a certain situation.
Okay.
But I think Imam knowing that situation said it's better not to take the individual's name, but it would be permissible.
So for example? What would be an example of that?
Let's say, for example, like you're in a marriage,
right,
and your husband is doing X, Y, and Z,
right,
and you want to ask like the Mufti Sahib or the Sheikh whether that's permissible or not. So I guess in that situation, it would be permissible to mention the faults because you're trying to see if whether that person's doing this right or if it's doing it wrong. What course of action should I take?
Yeah, it's a real situation. So I have to mention the context of the variables in that situation to get legal ruling about it. Right. Beside that, why are you talking about people's faults? Why are you talking, and beside those other cases that are like specifically mentioned, why are you mentioning people's faults? You should always kind of assume like, man, I might be envy. It might be rancor. Maybe it's just, maybe I'm hating. And then, there should be valid reason. This is a really important idea that he says here. True brotherhood remains firm against any changes. It remains firm against any changes. Which means what? The vicissitudes of time, I move away, you move away, I get rich, you get poor, I get poor, whatever happens, if we're really brothers and sisters for Allah, it remains firm. The taghayyurat, the vicissitudes of time, are not going to remove the fact that we have brotherhood. And for that reason, the time-space continuum really is relative when it comes to this idea of fraternity and sorority. Right? كَم مِّن قَرِيبٍ بَعِيدٍ وَكَم مِّن بَعِيدٍ قَرِيب. How often is someone distant but they're really close, or someone is close but they're actually really distant? He mentions a statement of the Prophet ﷺ, peace be upon him, on page 45. If a man gives up contention when he is in the wrong, a house will be built for him within the garden of paradise. But if a man gives up contention, even when he is right, a house will be built for him in the loftiest part of the garden, leaving argumentation. If you're wrong, so like, you know what I'm saying, you're in the wrong, and you're like, you know what, I'm going to just stop arguing, Allah will build a house for you in paradise. But if you give it up when you're right, it'll be built for you in Firdaus al-A'la, in the loftiest part of paradise, meaning you have the right to, you know that you're correct, but you leave it anyway. I won't ask for a show of hands, but many of us are married. It's like easy to be like, yeah, when we were at the masjid arguing the other day about that, what? That's easy, because you're not at the masjid that often anyway. But what if it's with your spouse, right? No. Remember the hadith? Khalas. Honey, I'm investing in our future. Right? Allah. No. The fourth duty, speaking out. It's page 49. So just as brotherhood calls for silence in unpleasant things, it requires the utterance of favorable things. And this is where we can measure our fair weather friendness. We often come to those that we love or those that love us in bad times. And we're like, oh my God, you got to help me out. It's all bad. What happened? And then you tell them about, right, the situation. But then you never update them when it gets fixed. Bring people good news. Yo, I really need to talk to you. Why? I got good news for you. You're like, wow, it's the first time it's ever happened to me. Someone really needs to talk to me because I have something good to say. Remember how I had this situation? Yeah, I just want to tell you everything worked out. Because it makes people hopeful. If all you're ever hearing about is the problems, it can make a person despair. But also, you should be silent in mentioning their faults. You should be generous in uttering the favorable things about the person. And you should use the tongue to express affection to your brother. The Prophet ﷺ is reported to have said, if one of you loves his brother, let him know it. Allahu Akbar. One of the most powerful things to me about Islam is this emphasis on verbal affirmation of love for the other. And I think that it's something that the Muslim community really struggles with. One, because of the culture of formality that we've often adopted. Two, because we didn't grow up saying it or hearing it. We adopt modalities that are not actually consistent with the prophetic model. And if this is an easy one to challenge, and this is your only, maybe not your only, but your first homework assignment from today's workshop, I want you to tell somebody that you've never told that you love them, that you love them. First problem, but Aki, what if it's a... Look, sexual objectification is not the only possible reality. So if you automatically went to, yeah, I always wanted to tell that one sister who's in the halakha that I love her, then you got other stuff you got to work on. You know what I mean? Don't tell it to someone that you think is going to be kind of drama, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? Go tell your professor of the opposite sex, I love you, prof, and they're like, right? This is not Raiders of the Lost Ark. I am not Harrison Ford. You're not allowed to, you guys don't remember that reference from the class. You know, she closed her eyes and she had I love you written on her eyelids. Huh? Say it to someone that's not going to, it's going to be a big problem. And the easiest place to start is oftentimes with family members that you haven't said it to. I mean, so often we read these things and we export them to the community, but we remember that the family is actually the core of the community. Like one of my teachers told me, and he's also in public service, he said, all that stuff we're doing out in the community, that's just practice for home. It's just for practice for home. So if there's a family member, and I'm asking you to really make a commitment to this, if there's a family member who you've never said that to, I just want to tell you that I love you, right? It's interesting too that the Prophet ﷺ, Here he doesn't say in this hadith, if one of you loves his brother, lillah, for Allah, let him know that. There are other hadiths, like the rigorously authenticated hadith in Bukhari, where he says there's three things. If a person has them, they will experience the sweetness of faith. One, that God and His Messenger be more beloved to that person than everything other than the two of them. And yakun Allahu wa rasuluhu ahabba ilayhi mimma siwahuma. That he love God and His Messenger more than anything else. Two, that if he loves a person, he or she loves him only for God. And three, that the person hates to fall back into disbelief like a person would hate to be thrown into the fire. So we know that we're supposed to love each other for Allah. But it's not like a prerequisite that you say, I love you for Allah. And Muslims have adopted it almost to kind of like make it really clear that like, Akhi, I love you, but I only love you for Allah. I don't really love you. I just love you for Allah. And it almost makes it colder than, if it's for Allah, shouldn't it be even deeper? And didn't he mention here the statement of Imam Al-Hasan where the man said, I love you? He said, Ajaybi ka jaybik? Is my pocket like your pocket? He said, no. He said, I have no need for your love. Right? In other words, you love me? Yalla khair. Can I take from your bank account as I wish? And can you take from my bank account? No, then we don't really love one another. So you say you love me for Allah. Tuhibbuni lillah. You love me for Allah. That's a very lofty claim. Right? Man came to the Prophet ﷺ, he said, I love you. He said, consider what you're saying. He said, I love you. He said, then prepare for poverty. Because poverty comes to a person quicker. So poverty comes to a person who loves me quicker than water follows its natural course. In other words, are you really ready to ride? You really ready to ride? Oh, you love me? Right? So it's a lofty claim. That's why the Prophet says, if one of you loves his brother, let him tell him. So if you feel it, like, I love this person, you should tell them. I told my teacher once, I said, I love you. We were on Hajj. We were on Hajj in Mina. And I said to my teacher, I love you. He said, إِذَا أَرَدْتَ أَن تَعْرِفَ مَكَانَكَ فِي قَلْبِ أَخِيكَ فَانظُرْ إِلَى مَكَانِهِ فِي قَلْبِكَ. If you want to know your place in your brother's heart, look at his place and yours. If you want to know, I'm amazed that none of you are writing. You must have photographic memories. If you want to know your place in your brother's heart, then look at his place, what? And yours. I saw him like a year later. I said, I love you. He said, إِذَا أَرَدْتَ أَن تَعْرِفَ مَكَانَكَ فِي قَلْبِ أَخِيكَ فَانظُرْ إِلَى مَكَانِهِ فِي قَلْبِكَ. If you wanted to know your place in your brother's heart, then look at his place and yours. He said the exact same. But what he was really saying is what? I love you too. In other words, if you love me that much, that's how much I love you. So it's a beautiful thing to express what is already existing of love. May Allah increase us all in love. Some of you may say, that's just so Californian, Bay Area, incense burning, Tatlif collective. Man, we need some deen, we need some deen, we need some minhaj. We need some brothers on the hut, right? Ajib. You didn't hear the Prophet say what? لِن تَدْخُلَ الْجَنَّةَ حَتَّى تُؤْمِنُوا. You will not enter paradise until you believe. وَلَن تُؤْمِنُوا حَتَّى تَحَابُوا. And you will not believe until you what? Love one another. Should I not guide you to an action that if you do it, tahabbabtum, you will love one another? He said what? Spread salam amongst yourselves. Say salam. Spread peace amongst yourselves. May Allah make us peacemakers. Na'am. So he says that you should express it. He gave this command because the communication brings an increase in love. Na'am. The mutual love amongst the believers is required by the sacred law. Umar radiallahu anhu said, there are three ways of showing sincere brotherly love. One, give the person the greeting of peace when you first meet him. And we're taught that the person who says salam first is free from nifaq, is free from hypocrisy. So try to be the first one to say it. When someone gets like, assalamu alaikum, try to be them too. Because al-badi bi salam, the person who begins with the salam, has a what? A freedom from hypocrisy. Because it's like, I didn't want to, you greet me. Right? I don't have to greet you. So you try to what? Beat them to the punch. So he says first, greet them with salam. Two, make them comfortable. And three, call him or her by their favorite name. Make them comfortable. And this is why we've got to try to get to know one another better. And I want to agitate something that's just very real for me right now, and that's the whole takalluf thing. Takalluf is only as good as it leads you to actually making the person more comfortable. But sometimes we do it so much that it makes it really, really uncomfortable, right? In other words, we try so hard to do what is proper and what is good at protocol in the moment that we actually make the other person really uncomfortable. Do you know what I'm saying? To where it's like, again, they say, would you, I'm gonna walk to Bart. You say, no, let me give you a ride. And they're like, no, I want to walk. No. Let me give you a ride. And like, no, I actually want to walk. No, you can't walk. And you're like, I want to walk. Leave me alone. You guys know what I'm saying? So where it just goes too far. And like a sister of mine, a very dear friend of mine, told me, she said she realized she had a problem with the whole takalluf thing when one time she was at somebody's house and they offered her, they're like, Faddalu, like come eat. And then and they offered like the chicken, and she really wanted the chicken, but she didn't want to say it because she had to do takalluf. You guys know what I'm saying? Like Islam is supposed to be an easy, natural religion. So when we get too formal, you can actually make the other person feel really uncomfortable. You know what I'm saying? If you don't know the person, that's different. You have to maintain a level of respectability and formality. Dr. Asad and his wife were both here. We were at my house last night, and we had guests over. And Asad texted me this morning, said we probably shouldn't invite people over when we're together. Because if you see us together, that's my boy. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, the gloves come off, we're going to have a good time, right? Someone watching will be like, you guys are both teachers? Astaghfirullah. No, because we amongst family. Remember when the Habib sallallahu alayhi wasallam was sitting with Abu Bakr and Umar, and part of his blessed thigh was uncovered. And Sayyidina Uthman ibn Affan walks in, and the Prophet covered his thigh. Covered his thigh. And then when Sayyidina Uthman left, Abu Bakr and Umar said, Ya Rasulullah, why did you cover his thigh? He said, Innuhu rajulun tastahi minhu al-malaika. He said, Uthman is a person that even the angels are shy before. Right? So the Prophet knew there's something particular about Sayyidina Uthman. But he was with Sayyidina Abu Bakr and Sayyidina Umar. Those were his two closest companions. Right? He was not uncovering his nudity proper, obviously, hashahu min dhalik, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, but part of his blessed thigh was uncovered. Are you all with me? So there was a level of comfort. So this is what we meant earlier about, like, engage this formality question a little bit better. Now, the youth actually generally stand to do better in terms of formality. Yes, ma'am, yes, sir, thank you, you're welcome, please. Letting the elders go first. Generally speaking, us as young people, we generally have a long way to go, even in living up to the standard of our parents, let alone their parents. But then, we've got to make sure that we're not being too uptight. Islam is supposed to be an easy religion. I was once sitting with my teacher, who's a world-renowned scholar, and I was asking him some really deep questions. And I was nervous, and so my foot went out, and it kicked his foot. And I felt horrible, so I put my foot back. And he's like, put your foot back. And I said, Sheikh, I can't put my foot back. He's like, put your foot back. I was like, he's like, put your foot back. Then I put my foot back on his foot. He goes, Kammil. He said, finish. Right? So it's kind of like, yeah, chill out. You know what I'm saying? Because sometimes when we're so formal, we make the other person really uncomfortable. So Sayyidina Umar is saying, what? That you make the person comfortable. Make them comfortable. So you got to know people. Some people want to talk, some people don't want to talk. Some people want, you got to know the person. Nah. May Allah make it easy. One time I went to visit my teacher who's from Arabian Peninsula, and I had been waiting the better part of 2 days to sit with him. And finally my turn came, and so he opened the door, and when I saw him as I was coming in, he rushed back and he sat down. He said, Tamaghrabtu lak. He said, I put on a Moroccan robe for you. Right? I'm not even Moroccan. Like, my wife is Moroccan. He knows that. But he was wearing like a regular, right, Arabian style robe. He said, Tamaghrabtu lak. I put on a Moroccan robe for you. Right? It was like, subhanAllah. This person's like, right, this big sheikh, and I'm this little tiny person from Campbell, California. And subhanAllah, like, what, you have enough intentionality to know that your students walking in the room, what would make them feel that I'm going to go out of my way to make you more comfortable. One of the biggest lessons for me and why they called the companions companions and not followers or students was I was traveling once with a teacher of mine in Morocco, and we had attended a funeral, and it went late at night until probably 2 or 3 in the morning. We finally get to the house we're going to be staying at, and it was in a Berber village in the mountains, and it was very cold, and you can't sleep on the floor, it's all tile. So you literally, you can't, you'd get ill if you felt. So they have these couches that are about as wide as those, but they're about yay high, and guests just sleep on those usually. So we came in this room, and all of the students went and just kind of quickly grabbed a blanket and fell asleep. Then I had to use the restroom, so I went to use the restroom, and I came out, and I saw the sheikh. He had just made wudu, and he's patting himself down. And he's a very, very prominent person of very, very notable lineage, and he also happens to be exceptionally wealthy. May Allah increase him in that. And he's a scholar, but he's also at this point in his 60s. So he's like like an uncle sheikh to me, like uncle, And so I looked, and there was a spot no bigger than the couch here, this first section, not this whole thing. And that was the only thing left. When I came out the bathroom, I was like, I got my eyes on it. But the sheikh's patting himself down, and he goes and lays down on that spot. I'm like, right? I'm jacked. I don't know, where am I going to sleep in the car? I'm going to stay up all night. So the sheikh lays down, and then he pulls up the blanket. He goes, Ta'al. He goes, come. And I was like, what? He goes, Tfaddal Ashi. And I slept with my feet in his face and his feet in my face, right? And he's Tfaddal, Tfaddal. You know what I'm saying? Like we were far enough away, it wasn't like I didn't sleep on top of him, you know what I'm saying? But I slept, and he's like this sheikh who's a sharif, and he's wealthy. SubhanAllah. And I slept with my feet in my sheikh's face all night long. It's like, SubhanAllah, you know what I'm saying? So may Allah increase us in that. And we've got to kind of chip away at the coldness around our hearts a little bit. Some of just the weirdness that we've developed to really become real brothers and sisters. May Allah make it easy. When my wife first came to America, Sheikh Khatri, who was my first teacher, and he gave Yahya his shahada. And he, at that point, may Allah give him a long life, keep him well. At that point, he was probably, I think, in his 60s. And some of you seen him, you've seen pictures of him, beautiful white beard. Beautiful, beautiful, big, long white beard. And a very, he's a man. Like, he's just a man, If you ever met Sheikh Khatri, you know what I'm talking about. And when my wife first got out of the car, we arrived to what was then Uncle Tarif's house in Santa Clara. And Sheikh Khatri was squatting on the ground, and he stood up, and he walked right toward her, and he said, Anu uhibbuki. He said, I love you. He said, Anu uhibbuki. He said, uhibbuki li'anniki sharifa wa li'annak zawjat Usama. Anu uhibbuki. He said, I love you. He said, I love you because you're a sharifa and because you're Usama's wife. I'll never forget that, because, you know what I'm saying? It was like this real authentic, grand, avuncular. Do you guys know the word avuncular? Who knows the word avuncular? How many of y'all know the word avuncular? Sarah knows it. You only know it because Ubayd taught you. That's how I know it too. This very avuncular, uncle-like affection. SubhanAllah. So those examples make you realize how much work we have to do. May Allah make it easy for us. Naam. Sincerity, he mentions that person who's not sincere in brotherhood is a hypocrite. Sincerity means equality between absence and presence, between the tongue and the heart. So he mentions that when you're going to mention your brother, pretend like they're listening. Pretend like they're like behind a veil listening to you speak, and then would you continue to say what you would say. And then he also mentions that if you're rich in knowledge, you're obliged to share. And here's a lot of the challenge for us. There's so many people in our community that lack the very basics of knowledge. And whatever you have been granted, you should share it with them. And he emphasizes also giving advice with discretion, or doing it privately, not in front of people. I know that I've struggled with that, and you've probably struggled with that. That's why, if you look even at social media, you can tag someone on Twitter, or you can direct message them. I guess if they're not following you, you might not be able to, but you could still, whatever. I think if you're following them, can you direct message them? They have to be following you too. They have to follow you. So just tag them at so-and-so. I'm about to put you on blast. You better follow me so I can direct message you. So they know. But also there's the Facebook wall. If someone's been adventurous enough to leave it open for you to write on, or there's an inbox. You know what I'm saying? You can do things with discretion if you want to advise somebody. For some reason in social media, when we want to give nasiha, we always do it on the wall, and we always do it, obviously, if it's relating to religion, with the caps lock on. Right? Caps lock, brother! Right? Right? Since we have to, right? As if they're going to hear you yelling, right, with that thing. It's better to give it in private. And it's interesting, for me, some of the more recent internet, actually a lot of the historical internet kerfuffles, or what one of my teachers called internet flatulence that happens, I've had the unique opportunity to actually talk to some of the people involved behind the scenes and not like on the threads. And it's really interesting how much more effective it's been to be able to have real conversations. And I can name, you guys know them all. I won't name them because you guys remember them all, but the famous, the this one and the that one, and right? I've actually often had the chance to talk to people behind the scenes, and there's a lot of really interesting nuances that you don't know about. And the fact that what you're reading on a thread, there's inboxing going on and phone calls going on that you don't know about. Hey, post this. Hey, post that. Hey, tag this. Just give the person advice in private. Some of the people involved in the the British happy, There was what, 1.5 million people that saw it, right? There was almost 2 million hits on that. And people were going completely haywire online about it. I was actually uniquely positioned to talk to some of the people involved in it that are anonymous and will remain so. But they anonymously came to meet me when I was in London. And I was able to tell them what I really thought. And I felt like that was more effective than had I made an online, you guys know my thoughts on the Happy Muslims thing, and then people read it and then get upset and then delete you and then re-add you and then block you and then you try to find out if they blocked you. And that's why discretion is a good thing, being able to advise people in private. May Allah make it easy for us to do that. Naam. The Prophet ﷺ said, the believer is a mirror to the believer. The believer is a mirror to the believer. What does that mean? What does that mean? Hello? The believer is a mirror to the believer. Okay, we can end class now. Just kidding. Jessica?
He will show you your true self.
They'll show you your true self. What happens when you look in the mirror? It's not a trick question. Guys, you what? You see your reflection. But is it you? It's your perception of yourself. So it's not actually you, but it's a kind of a what? A mirror image of yourself. So there's two meanings of this hadith. And I mean, amongst the different meanings. One is that outwardly, you see in your brother or sister your glows and your grows. Your potential and your challenges. Your faults and your what? Opportunities. The things that are your advantages and your disadvantages. So I see it in you, and we talked about I notice it. So I can say, subhanAllah, like Allah shows me some of your beauty, and I see a reflection of hopefully some beauty that He's given me. Or sometimes Allah shows me some of your ugliness, and it's a reflection of my own ugliness. That's all still outward. Shaykh al-Harraq, Sidi Muhammad al-Harraq, rahmatullah alayh, the great Moroccan scholar, had a really interesting commentary on this hadith. He said that the esoteric meaning of the hadith is that the two souls of the believers are like mirrors, because when Allah created them, He gazed upon their two souls, nadratan muttahida, a united glance. In other words, Allah turned toward those two human souls in a unique way of turning in mercy, and that led for them to have a connection. They had an ittilaf. They had a what? Like a soul bond. He said, so when those two souls enter their physical bodies, that connection remains, and to where it moves beyond even the spiritual connection, to where there can actually be physical resemblance because the two people are so connected at a soul level, to where there can actually be perception of the other person's emotional or physical states, even if they're in two different locations. Now, for some of us, that might be like, whoa, trip out. But for others, you might be like, oh, no wonder, because you may have experienced that before, where you actually can feel somebody, like they're not there in front of you. They're not even in the same state, but you can be like, not like your Professor Xavier or whatever, but like you could feel, like you could actually feel what's going on with the person. I know of two people, one was in Arabia, the other was in Yemen, and the one who was in Yemen was fasting. It was a supererogatory fast, like Sha'ban, the month that we're in, for example. And the one who was in Arabia was not fasting. And the one who was in Arabia ate a date, and the one in Yemen tasted it. Like that, and he called him, he said, Aftartani, akhi. He says, you broke my fast, because he could actually taste it. And I know these two people, right? So there's realities that can happen. Now you say, akhi, you miss me with that hippie, Sufi, Bay Area, oud burning nonsense. But you got straight yaqeen and Steve Jobs, though. You got full belief in FaceTime. You got like haqqul yaqeen with Skype. You know what I'm saying? Like you believe that this machine can do that because of some technology. SubhanAllah. What do you think people were doing for centuries before they had this stuff? People were connected at a deep level. Naam. Allah let us taste some of that. Allah let us taste some of that. You know. Subhanallah. 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 That's where it gets deeper. ومن عجب أني أحن إليهم وأسأل شوقا عنهم وهم معي. It's amazing that I would incline toward them in longing and I ask about them, but they're with me. Huh? In other words, is this too deep for you guys? Huh? It's too deep for you. It is, huh? You're so, huh? The poet says what? Well, like the poet said, وَتَطْلُبُهُمْ عَيْنِي وَهُمْ فِي سَوَادِهَا. My eye is looking for them, but they're in the iris. In other words, I'm looking for my beloved, but my beloved is not really distant because of the emotional and spiritual connection that we have. We may be physically distant, but they're right there with me the whole time. Huh? That's what he's talking about. And because now, you guys say, what's your delil, akhi? And al-muminu mir'atul mu'min. That the believer is the mirror of the believer. So when you look in the mirror, it's not actually you, and your friend or brother is not actually you, but they're a mirror image of you. Do you know what I'm saying? They're a mirror image of you. And at an esoteric level, this is what we're trying, hopefully, one day to achieve with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to become mirrors of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to where we reflect some of the Muhammadic realities, moving beyond just the stuff of the outward, but actually the what? What would Muhammad think? How did Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam think? How did Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam feel? That's what we're ultimately trying to attain. May Allah let us taste some of that. Naam. Any questions? We have a few minutes for reflections, questions. Yes, ma'am.
I have a reflection.
Sure.
So I was having a conversation with my friend recently. She said something that really stood out to me. Where like a lot of times we'll always say like, oh, I love you for the sake of Allah.
Mm-hmm.
But she was saying like rather than saying that, we should say I love you in my love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Mm-hmm.
And that I love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so deeply that it's manifested.
Well, love begins maybe as a one-directional thing, where A loves B, and then it becomes a bi-directional thing where B loves A and A loves B, and then it can become a multi-directional thing where A and B love C and D and E and F and G, and then it become a boundless reality where there's not any limit to love. It's not directional, but it's like a what? All-encompassing reality. Yeah. Why was the Prophet ﷺ called Habibullah? Who knows what the Habib is in Arabic? What is Muhib? Muhib is what? A lover. What is Mahbub? The beloved. What is Habib? Huwa al-muhibbu wal-mahbubu. Is the lover and the beloved. In other words, the Prophet ﷺ is the greatest one who ever loved Allah and the most beloved one ever to Allah. So it's the idea of bidirectional love, right? But then there's the reality beyond direction, where a theosis with the name Al-Wadud, to where one becomes an actual agent of the manifestation of God's name, the All-Loving. Not that one becomes God, that's obviously not conceivable, that's impossible. But one becomes a perfect agent of the reality of that name, what bounds does that have? Right? Where love is no longer... So when you're saying like, I love you for the sake of Allah, or I love you in my love for Allah, what if the person was actually deep enough to where they loved Allah so much and they loved you so much, where when they just said, I love you, it meant all of the above, and then things that you can't even articulate. That's where we should try to strive. Does that make sense? Well, kulu ina'an, it probably doesn't make sense. Does it make sense? Dania? A little confused. Why are you confused? You have multi-directional confusion or, bi-directional confusion?
I guess it's just, I think just trying to understand just the limitless of it. It's like, it's hard to put a definition just to that. So it's not that I don't understand anything, it's just a lot to.
You all ever see The Kite Runner? Did you read The Kite Runner? Or see how many of y'all saw the movie? You remember that scene where he throws the pomegranate at him? And he takes a pomegranate and starts smashing it on himself? Y'all remember that? That's kind of what I mean. He's like, dude, you know what I'm saying? I love you so much, I'll smash pomegranates on myself for you, bro. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, to where it's like, he's picking on him. And I don't remember exactly what's happening, but he was basically telling him to get away from me. He started throwing pomegranates. Remember, he takes a pomegranate and starts smashing himself. Like, subhanAllah, like, you're so, you know what I'm saying? I love you. Like, I love you so much that I'm going to smash pomegranates on myself. So because I think, and I can feel Dr. Assad getting ready to talk about this, because he's trying to take the idea out of my mind before I say, but I'm just kidding. But where when we say, even when we say, I love you for the sake of Allah, again, do we know what that means? And if we know what it means, what does it really feel like? And are we using it sometimes as a way to bypass some of what signing up for love really means, right? And so even I love you in my love for Allah. Remember and I'll come to your reflection, Dr. Asad, where there was a woman who was a bondswoman, and again, consider the socio-historical context of that. And she was praying at nighttime, and her master heard her say, Allahumma inni as'aluka bihubbika li illa ma ghafarta li. Oh Allah, I ask you by your love of me that you'll forgive me. And her master heard her say that. So he said to her, Ya fulana, alam yakun laki an taquli, Allahumma inni as'aluka bihubbi laka. He said, oh ma'am, oh miss, shouldn't you have said, oh Allah, ask you by my love of you. In other words, he hears it again as a directional thing. It's more, I love you, Allah, so since I love you, forgive me. She said, if he didn't love me, he would not have me prostrate before him. Right? In other words, her perception of Allah letting her pray to him was that he loved her. Do you see what I'm saying? So in reality, we could say that what? Well, maybe she's not doing everything and following the sunnah perfectly, so she doesn't really love Allah. At one level, that's true. But then there's a reality where she perceives it as well. Allah obviously loves me. Ahibbullaha lima yaghdukum bihi min ni'ami. The Prophet says what? Love Allah because of the blessings that he gives you. Question, should you only love Allah because of the blessings that he gives you? Why is the Prophet saying that? He's given us an approximation to say, oh, you need reason to love the divine? Yalla, lima yaghdukum bihi min ni'ami, because of what he's done for you. Do you know what I'm saying? But Allah deserves our love even if he never, you know what I'm saying? If he never gave you anything. He subhanahu who is a perfect object of love. This is perhaps another workshop. You're more confused than you were before, aren't you? Okay, alhamdulillah. Dr. Asad?
No, I had a question to follow up on that. I think the phrase to love someone for the sake of Allah makes it seem like something you have to strive to do, like you need an external reason to genuinely love. We're talking about genuinely loving people. So how does one understand the phrase? Because it comes from there's a hadith about 7 people whom Allah saved them. It's about loving people for the sake of Allah. So that ends up being something we're told we should do. How do you reconcile that with community and trying to genuinely, spontaneously love someone? When the phrase for the sake of Allah tends to mean, some striving against yourself. At least to me.
Right. Well, I mean, one of them is in light of what we were reflecting on at the end of the last section, where the Prophet talks about, the mirror. And then the statement of the Prophet where he says, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, al-arwah junudun mujannada. Human souls are like regimented troops. Ma ta'arafa minha talafa. When two of them recognize one another, there will be an affinity. Wa ma tanakara min ikhtalaf. And if they do not recognize one another, there will be, right, disparity or difference. They'll disincline from one another. And what that's referring to is the reality that we were standing before God on the day of what's called the day of Alastu bi Rabbikum, when Allah talks about in the Quran that He brought forth the souls from the loins of Adam, from his progeny, and brought them to witness against themselves and asked them, Alastu bi Rabbikum, am I not your Lord? So that means everybody who was ever created was there on the day when God said, am I not your Lord? This is called the day of Alastu bi Rabbikum, the day of what's called the Mithaq, the original covenant, right? They say the interpretation of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where he says that human souls are like regimented troops. If you feel an affinity from people, you guys have all experienced this. Like, I just met this person and I feel like I've known them forever. Why do you feel like you've known them forever? Because you have known them forever. You've known them since before time. So yeah, you've known them forever. Y'all been friends since what? Before Ibrahim alayhi salam, before Adam alayhi salam. Upon them all be peace. So that's one of the things, is that there's going to be some people you don't have to try to love them. You have a natural affinity because you have a soul connection that precedes time itself. And in this regard, the aforementioned Shaykh al-Harraq said, Salul hubba anni halana fihi mudda'i. Ask love about me. He personifies love. Ask love about me. Hal ana fihi mudda'i. Ask him if I'm a false claimant. فَإِنُّهُ يَضْرِي فِي صَبَابَةِ مَوْضِعِي. Because love knows about the suffering that I'm experiencing. وَيَعْلَمُ حَقًّا أَنَّ لِي أَحِبَّةً أُحِبُّهُمْ بِطَبْعِي لَا بِتَطَبْعِي. And love knows truthfully that I have these beloveds who I love naturally. I don't have to try to love them. In other words, there's going to be some people, it doesn't come from like candy bar, movie ticket, ride to the masjid, let me marry his daughter, whatever. It's just like, I don't know why, but I love this person. Allah increase us in that. You guys are afraid to say Ameen. May Allah increase us in that. Where it's just natural, right? The deeper your love is with Allah, well, it should be easier for you to feel that with more people. Recognizing that there's just going to be some people that what? It just don't click. You know what I'm saying? That's the yarhamakallah wa alaikum salam if you die I'll bury you factor. You know what I'm saying? No, really, you sneeze, I'm going to say yarhamakallah. Wa alaikum salam. You know, keep it moving. Because I don't, safe distance, right? But when it comes to community, part of what he talked about in the book is that fraternity and sorority comes from the manifestation of good character. So, in other words, I don't have to necessarily feel this deep pre-eternal soul love fraternity thing with the person for me to be nice to them. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm nice to the old woman who needs me to help her walk her groceries across the street. I don't need to walk up and be like, he didn't mention that one of the 4 categories of duties of brotherhood. There's a lady I walked, you know what I'm saying? You should have a loving spirit. And that's why there's ta'alluq, takhalluq, and tahaqquq with each of the names. The connectedness to the name, the beginning to implement the attribute of the name, and then realizing or theosis of the name, right? Where what? So you hear that God is all loving. Oh, that sounds deep. So you get a ta'alluq. You begin to develop a connection with that name. Takhalluq is coming from the instruction of the beloved Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, where he says what? Takhallaqu bi akhlaqillah. Take on the character traits of God to the extent humanly possible. You could put parenthetically, right? But he doesn't say that parenthetically. He just says what? Takhallaqu bi akhlaqillah. Take on the character traits of God. Imam Zayd often parenthetically notes, which I think is important, to the extent what? Humanly possible. So you hear that God is loving, God is just, God is merciful, God is forbearant, right? You try to adopt those traits with yourself. So then you begin to do takhalluq, which is where you start to implement it. God is all loving. Man, I got some work to do. I got to start being more loving. Then there's tahaqquq, where you become a perfect agent of the manifestation of that name to the extent humanly possible, to where you become all loving in a way that you've realized that name. That sounds deep because I ain't done it yet. I ain't talking about you guys think how do you do it? I don't know. I'm still trying to figure it out. I mean, I know people that maybe I think might have, but the point is that we're supposed to aspire to a realization of it to where now the old lady carrying her bags across the street, I'm not looking at her is she Muslim, is she not? Is she old? Is she my mahram? Is she not? She just needs you to carry the groceries across the street. Do you know what I'm saying? So now I love her for the sake of Allah because Allah created her. Do you know the woman who feeds the cats out here? How many of y'all seen that woman before? I call her the sheikha. I call her my teacher because she's, subhanAllah, she comes and feeds the cats like clockwork. None of us know her. I don't know her name. I just know her sheikha because she comes, feeds the cats all the time. She brings water. She's had them all giving them shots. She brings them food. Some of the best cared for cats in Fremont. And they all live in the parking lot. When you go out, there are probably about 75 cats that come out. It's from the lady who cares for these cats. And subhanAllah, she comes. And when she's not going to be there, you know what? She assigns someone to fill in for her. And she's not on the volunteer roster. She doesn't need incentives, recognition, thank you. She's feeding these cats. And I would say, lillah. In other words, what? From an altruistic place of goodness. She's not looking for a reward. She's not waving to the security camera. So one day, one of my teachers was here, who's a very, I estimate him to be a very enlightened person. And I told him, I said, look, it's this woman. He said, she has a high station with God. He said, do you mind if I go out and greet her? I said, sure. So he walks up. He said, I just want to say thank you. And he got really close to her, about yay close. He's like, I just wanted to say thank you for feeding the cats, and God bless you, so nice of you. I walked away. He says, do you know why I got close to her? I said, why? He said, because I wanted to see if she was from the angels or the human beings. I wanted to see, was she from the malaika or from Bani Adam? I wanted to know whether, we're just thinking what? Animals, there's people dying in Syria, East Oakland. That's true. That's true. Southside Chicago is happening. East Oakland is happening. Syria is happening. But so are the cats in the parking lot. Do you understand what I'm saying? I know I'm kind of off, but so the point is, وَمَنْ نَفْسُهُ بِغَيْرِ جَمَالٍ لَا يَرَى فِي الْوُجُودِ شَيْئًا جَمِيلًا. Somebody whose self is oriented to other than beauty cannot see beauty in the world. A friend of mine came out the masjid one day, kissed a brother on the cheek. He said, Aki, don't kiss me, It's not from the sunnah. You know what he said to him? He said, I love you, What are you going to say to that? What are you going to say to that? Right? And my older brother lived in Oakland on Grand Avenue. one day he came into his apartment building. There's this little black kid with a little toy gun. He's like, bang, 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 bang. He stopped him. He said, you could shoot me all you want. All I'm going to do is love you. And he said, the little kid went like this. No, y'all laughing, but think about this. He looked at him. He said he came back in the apartment building like 3 days later, and he was with his little homie. He pointed and said, hey, there goes that dude that said he's going to love me. Like 3 days later. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's like, where's your, and do you need any more proof then? You will not enter paradise until you believe. You will not believe until you love one another. Like, what do you want? Allah la iman liman la muhabbata lah. And he said it 3 times, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. There is no faith for the one who does not have love. Allah la iman liman la muhabbata lah. Allah la iman liman la muhabbata lah. And the scholars said something very interesting. They said faith cannot benefit without love, but love can benefit without faith. Some of you say, astaghfirullah, what is it? Huh? The Prophet just said, there is no faith for one who lacks love. But didn't he say that on every Monday, Abu Lahab will have the punishment lightened for him merely because he freed Thuwayba the day that the Prophet was born? What does that mean? Thuwayba was a bondswoman of a man named Abu Lahab. Abu Lahab was the Prophet's uncle. Before the Prophet was a prophet, he's a child, he's born. Thuwayba came to Abu Lahab and said, you had a nephew, his name was Muhammad. He said, you're free. He was so delighted at the birth of his nephew before he was a prophet that he freed Thuwayba, right? And the Prophet tells us that on every Monday, the punishment is lightened for Abu Lahab. He's still in the fire. Tabbat yada abi lahabin wa tab. He's cursed, he's damned in the Quran. We know he's in the fire. We know that because Allah himself told us that. But the Prophet said that the fire is lightened on every Monday because he freed Thuwayba before the Prophet was even a prophet. Because of what? Love. So it benefits him, doesn't free him from the fire, but it benefits him. Whereas we could worship our whole life, Hajj, Umrah, Zakat, Khatam, Quran, Dhikr all day long. If you don't have love, no faith. May Allah increase us in love. I don't know if I really answered your question. Wallahu a'lam. Yes, Laura.
I wanted to go back to your point about how, like sometimes you meet people and you feel like you just click with them.
That's right.
I feel like I've known you all my life.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know, I personally feel like I can count on one hand how many times that's happened. I'm wondering can we change things about ourselves to make it happen more often, or is it something entirely out of our control, in terms of who we meet and just click with?
Cosmically, you can't do anything. In other words, they're regimented. That deep cosmic truth of there's people who are actually your soulmates in the truest sense of the word, not in the kind of cheap and romantic sense of the word. The people that you actually were near on that day, you were near them. And you can't do anything to change that because it was a pre-eternal reality. Functionally and socially, there's a lot of things we can do. And we can implement what we learn in this book. That's kind of what the book is about. I think the most difficult one is developing more self-authenticity and self-awareness to where I'm more honest with myself about both my challenges and my advantages, right? So some of us may just have a real challenge with interrupting people. So maybe it's just that the person might have really been really cool and you might have clicked with them, but you never let them talk enough to ever figure out whether or not you were going to click with them. Or active listening. Did we listen actively? So as we were listening to them, were we preparing our response? Or were we actually listening to what they said? Dr. Jackson said it, I think, most beautifully, that if you're afraid to be vulnerable, you can never love. So a lot of times the defense mechanisms that we have up that we may be trying to fight off ward off some of our own fears, letting go of that guard. But the question is, where do we have enough space where we feel safe enough to do that, to where we feel we can be vulnerable? Because ironically, sometimes people who you end up being really close with may have been people that it started out maybe with a tense situation. I know a lot of situations like that where it could have started out where there was some tension and then you led to becoming, and this is where the Prophet really, really, if you didn't note anything, I would maybe note this, where he tells us what? Love your beloved with some restraint, because they could become your enemy someday. Love your beloved with some restraint, because they could become your enemy someday. And hate your enemy with some restraint, because they could become your beloved someday. Right? The idea that just, the vicissitudes of time. Duty number 5. 2 kinds of failure from a friend. This is really deep. One, religious failure. And then two, failure in their duty to you. So he talks about here the fifth duty is forgiveness. Religious failure where the person has committed an offense against you. And forgiveness would be coupled with proper action, which is to advise kindly with the intention of restoring that person to a virtuous state. So they do something wrong religiously against you, you give them nasiha. Cicero said something very interesting in this regard. He said, advice is not measured by intention, but rather by outcome. Advice is not measured by intention, but by outcome. In other words, you gave the person advice, well, I intended well. Yeah, but you made it worse. You made it worse. In other words, what is your advice going to end up in? Try to give advice in a way that's going to actually be solution-oriented. It's going to bring about what? A positive change. So if the person's committed an offense against you, give them advice, again, privately, trying to restore them to a virtuous state. Also, if you and I are on the path together and I fall off, how are you going to advise me? Or do you advise me, or do you cut off ties? And this is, I think, one of the most important things when it comes to community. Or two, failure in their duty to you through an omission in brotherhood. If they have fallen short in your right, forgive them. If they've made a mistake religiously, advise them. But if it's something that they've fallen short in the right of brotherhood or sisterhood, forgive them. What does Allah tell the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? لا ايش قال لك؟ فاعفوا عنهم واستغفر لهم وشاورهم في الأمر. بس ايش اللي قبل فاعفوا عنهم واستغفر لهم وشاورهم في الأمر. قبل لا فبما رحمة من الله لنت لهم. لا فاعفوا عنهم واستغفر لهم وشاورهم في الأمر. فبما رحمة من الله لنت لهم. ولو وكنت فظا غليظ القلب لا يفضل من حولك فاعفوا عنهم. ما يجي كذا. ها يا عثمان ايوه It's a really amazing verse. Just trying to get the verse from the Quran right. Are you sure? Okay. Allahu 10,000%, mashallah. Naam. So it is from God's mercy that you are made gentle and you're dealing with them. And had you been harsh and hard-hearted, they would have naturally disinclined from being around you. So pardon them and seek forgiveness for them and seek their counsel regarding matters. And when you make resolve, trust in Allah. Listen to this. It's from Allah's mercy that you are made gentle with them. فَبِمَا رَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ. In other words, if Allah hadn't been merciful, the Prophet ﷺ wouldn't have necessarily been gentle with them. His gentleness is a reflection of the mercy of Allah. And it's from Allah's mercy that He was لِنْتَ لَهُمْ. You were made literally, layin means what? Gentle, soft. And had you been, وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَضًّا, had you been harsh, غَلِيظُ الْقَلْبِ, hard-hearted, لَنْفَضُّ مِنْ حَوْلِكَ. What does انفض mean? انفض ينفض, it's like if you kept pouring water in this cup, ينفض means it just pours over, like water follows its natural course, that they would have just naturally disinclined from being around you. So pardon them and seek forgiveness for them. Listen, you all ain't even listening. So pardon them and seek forgiveness for them and seek their counsel regarding matters. Yeah, it's the messenger of God. It's from Allah's mercy that you were made gentle. Had you been harsh, they would have left. So forgive them and seek forgiveness for them. And what? وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ. And seek their counsel regarding matters. You just talked about them, Allah, as saying that they needed pardoning and that He should seek your forgiveness for them. And then you're telling Him to what? Seek their shura. See what they think about things. What's the verse? Yeah, Uthman. Al-Imran, 159 of the 3rd chapter of the Quran. Ajib. The scholar says something really interesting. Number one, fa'fu anhum is indicative that they've made a mistake. Afu, pardoning, comes after what? An error. So pardon them. That means that they've made a mistake. And ask Allah to forgive them. It what? Emphasizes that they need forgiveness from Allah. وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ. and seek their shura, seek their counsel about things. So that Allah is commanding the Prophet ﷺ to seek counsel from people who he just established there were people who did what? Made a mistake. But seek their counsel things. And then when you trust in Allah, when you have resolve, فَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ, trust in Allah. It's an amazing example. And for this reason, we see that the Prophet ﷺ, لِمْ يَغْضَبْ لِنَفْسِهِ قَطْ. He never got angry for himself. But if people transgress against the limits of Allah, كَانَ أَشَدَّ النَّاسِ غَضَبًا. He was the strongest of people in anger. In other words, he got angry for the right reasons. There were times when the Prophet ﷺ would come out and you could see the change in the color of his face. You could see his veins. You could see him visibly angry, and it was not about himself. If people hurt him, he forgave them, right? But if it came to what was ultimately right or wrong, that is what angered him. So here, if it's a religious failure, they make a wrong, advise them. If they've wronged you, forgive them. And he mentions the difference of opinion between Abu Dharr and other companions, and this was from page 60. Those of you who have the text, you can turn to it. This will be one of the times when we read directly from the text. If you're incapable of this, i.e. forgiving him, and he remains obstinate, at this point there's a divergence in the ways followed by the companions and the successors of the Prophet ﷺ, whether to maintain his right to affection or to cut off relations. So check it out. The person they make an error. They've gone wrong. Do you keep the relationship or do you what? Cut them off. They've made an error. And he says that the Sahaba differed about this. The companions differed about how they dealt with this. Abu Dharr, may Allah be pleased with him, favored severance. He said, if your brother turns his back on his duty, hate him as you used to love him. Ajib. In other words, why do we love people? Do we love them essentially, or we love them because of the virtue and the good that God has given them? And so think about it like this. If George W. Bush walked in here right now and was like, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah, what would you do? You'd be like, takbir. Wouldn't you? What would you do? Takbir, people like, Allahu A'lam, right? What would you do? Think about it. May Allah guide George W. Bush. That's a sincere prayer. If W walked in here and said what? Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa Rasulullah. Stop. You have to say what? Marhaban bi George, right? Ahlan wa sahlan. And also, you have to believe that Allah forgave everything he did before. Imagine what it was like for the Prophet to take the shahada of Wahshi. Allahumma salli alayhi. You know when the spear hit Sayyidina Hamza, it went out his gut and out his back and he continued to fight. And Sayyidina Hamza, the Prophet his father had passed before him. So he saw Sayyidina Hamza like his father, right? And then he sees his blessed face mutilated, they cut him up. And then Wahshi comes and says shahada, as does Hind, doesn't she? I mean, right? So imagine what it's like for the Prophet to actually take the shahada. Why? He accepted his shahada. And it's narrated that he said he didn't want to see him. Right? But there's comments about that. But the point is, it's not easy to think. So if George W. Bush came in and said shahada right now, khalas, yani marhaban bi George, ahla wa sahla. Right? And if another person, think about the most beloved Muslim that you know, if they leave Islam and they turn their back on the truth, you have to be, you got to stay with the truth. Sayyidina Umar said, the truth left me friendless. So the point is that like we love for Allah, we don't essentialize people. So if the worst person in the world becomes Muslim, we have to love them. And if the best person in the world turns on truth, we have to also be critical about that. This was Abu Dharr saying, if they mess up, khalas, cut it off. Love them hate them like you used to love them. I don't incline for this opinion, FYI. He considered this course dictated by love for God's sake and hate for God's sake. As for Abu Darda and one group of the companions, they took the opposite view. Abu Darda said, if your brother alters and changes his hue, do not desert him on that account, for your brother will sometimes be crooked and sometimes will be straight. Ibrahim al-Nakha'i said, do not break off from your brother and do not shun him on account of a sin he has committed, for he may commit it today, but give it up tomorrow. He also said, do not tell people of the mistake of a learned man, for the learned man may make a mistake and then leave it. Put that in your YouTube, Facebook, Google, Twitter, hashtag, geopolitical smoothie, blender and make a smoothie. I would say pipe and smoke it, but we're Muslim. So He said what? Do not tell people of the mistake of a learned man. For the learned man may make a mistake and then what? Leave it. So you say, well, I can't believe that so-and-so did such and such. Well, maybe they'll make tawbah from that. Maybe they made an error, right? They'll learn their mistake and then they'll fix it. If you would have met Malcolm when he was little, when he was Detroit Red, what would you have said? Oh, he a pimp, he a what? A robber, huh? Well, you would have met Malcolm when he thought Elijah Muhammad was a messenger of God. What did he say? He's a deviant, heterodox, heretical kafir. But you didn't know he was going to become the great man that he becomes, the great saint of American Islam. Millions of people owing their Islam to his great example, rahmatullah alayh. Right? So the point is what? The person makes a mistake, they'll fix it. According to the tradition, beware of the mistake of the learned, do not cut him off, but await his return. It is related about Umar that he once inquired after a man he had taken as a brother and who had gone away to Syria. He asked someone who came to him, what has my brother been doing? That man is Satan's brother. He has committed the major sins, even lapsing into wine drinking. Telling his informant to let him know when he intended to return, Omar wrote to his brother, in the name of God, All-Merciful, Hamim. The revelation of the book is from God, Almighty, All-Knowing, forgiver of sins, acceptor of repentance, stern in punishment. He remonstrated with him under this quotation and chided him. His brother wept when he read the letter, saying, God speaks the truth, and Omar advises me truly. So he repented and came back. So the point is what? Sayyidina Omar had made friends with the person. He travels away to Syria. He says, how is he? He said, he's Shaitan's brother. He said, what do you mean? And then he wrote him this letter. When he got the letter, he did what? He repented. But this is also the person who, radiyallahu anhu, the Nile used to have this flood every year, and they used to sacrifice a virgin and throw the virgin into the Nile, and they believed if they didn't do that, it would flood. And so during the caliphate of Sayyidina Umar, they came to him and complained of this norm, that the Nile would flood. And so he said, because you think you get to send an email, it's going to work. You ain't Omar, right? Listen. He said what? He wrote a letter. He said, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, to the Nile of Egypt, from Umar ibn al-Khattab. If you're flowing by the power of God, then don't flow. And if you're flowing by your own power, then go ahead and flood. They said, take this back to the Nile, throw it in it. He threw it in the Nile, it didn't flood no more. There you are. That's called what? Yaqeen. Right? So when he wrote the letter, it's different. You think, I'm just sending him a text, make tawbah. They're like, because it depends on the heart that it was coming from, right? So when he wrote that verse, his brother read it and made tawbah. There's a story of two brothers, one of whom was smitten with a desire. He revealed it to his brother and said, I have a blemish. So if you wish, you may consider yourself released from your contract of brotherhood with me. But the other said, I am not one to dissolve our contract on account of your error. But in other words, he comes clean and says, what? I got issues. So if you don't want to be friends, it's cool. He said, what? I wouldn't cut off ties because of a mistake. Then he made a contract between him and God that he would neither eat nor drink till God cured his brother of his passion. Are you all listening to this? For 40 days, he kept asking him about his desire. His brother kept saying that his heart was set on his condition. So he wasted away of sorrow and hunger. At the end of 40 days, the passion left his brother's heart and he gave him the good news. At last he ate and drank, having all but perished from emaciation and suffering. So he comes, he's like, look, I got issues, man. If you want to break our contract of brotherhood, I understand. He says, what? Man, I will not turn my back on you while you're down. And then he goes and refuses to eat until Allah removes the blemish from his brother, right? SubhanAllah. So we say what? Oh, I can't do that. It's Sha'ban. It's Sha'ban. So you say what? I know my cousin so-and-so, or my brother so-and-so, or my spouse, or my neighbor, or my friend, or my parent has this issue. Yallah. Fast. Fast for them. Say, I'm going to fast next Monday with the intention that Allah remove such and such from my brother or sister. And depending on your level of sincerity, Allah will lift it. And we have to believe in the miraculous. It is related in the stories of the people of Israel that two godly brothers were upon a mountain. They were on a what? One of them came down to the town to buy a penny worth of meat. He just came to buy a little bit of meat. He saw a harlot at the butcher's shop, gazed upon her, fell in love with her, and carried her off to a private place to copulate with her. Now hold on a second. I want y'all to please, come on y'all. They live on a mountain. They like in khalwa, you know what I'm saying? They what? In isolation. He goes down to he said he went down to the marketplace to find a harlot. Why did he go down to the marketplace? it doesn't say his intention was to what? I gotta go, I gotta hit the club. Nah, he's going down to get meat. He goes to get the meat and sees this woman, falls in love with her, and goes and what? Hides out and has illicit sex with her in private. Listen. After spending 3 nights with her, he was ashamed to return to his brother in view of his offense. So not only, it wasn't like he just had a little miss up, he what? 3 nights. He's off at whatever version of the motel they had, for 3 nights. And then he says what? I can't go back. I'm embarrassed to go see my brother. This part right here, to me, that's the answer to a lot of issues in our community, right? It's not that people are bad people. They're ashamed of themselves before Allah. They're ashamed of themselves. They feel bad about the things that they've done. It's not that people are bad. People made mistakes. And there was a young man came up to me the other night. He said, what do you do about a broken heart? I automatically thought he was talking about what? Shanae. Broken heart. He said, what do you do about a broken heart? I said, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean? He said, if a person's heart is just broken. I said, well, like, if it was like, was it, I was trying to think, what was it about? He said, I can't forgive myself for the wrongs that I've done. I can't forgive myself. I feel so bad because of the things that I've done. And I just can't get over it. And we talked through that stuff. It wasn't about any girl or about this. He felt so bad about the mistakes he made. He felt like his heart was broken. May Allah help us all. Meanwhile, his brother missed him and felt concerned about him. I want you all to, those of you who have the book underlined, missed him. Underline what? He wasn't like, oh, we have a dawah program. We have a youth outreach program. We have a quota to meet. We have to justify to our donors. We have to be true to our organizational charter. We have to implement best practices. He what? I want to hear you say it. He what? So those people that you want to make dawah to, you don't miss them. You don't make dawah to someone, you don't miss them. He actually what? He missed him. I'm like, where's my brother at? So listen. His brother missed him and felt concerned about him. He descended down to the town and kept on asking about him till he was directed to him. Then he went in and found him sitting with the girl. He embraced him and began kissing him and hugging him, but the other denied all knowledge of him, being so ashamed that he said, then he said, come, my brother, for I know your condition and your story, yet you were never better loved to me, nor dearer to me than at this moment. La ilaha illallah. He comes in, finds him with old girl, and does what? Embraces him. What most people do, walk in and be like, my bad, and then leave, right? Because it's like, what? He got caught slipping. But he comes in and says, what? I love you. I hugs him. He kisses him and says, what? I never loved you more than I love you right now. He affirms to him what? The idea that I still love you. I haven't lost any love for you. Now, when he realized that what had happened had not lowered him in his brother's eye, he arose and went away with him. Right? When he realized that what? He still loves me, he went with him. This reflects one school of thought which is subtler and more penetrating than that of Abu Dhar. May Allah be pleased with him, though his is more proper and safer. Those of you who want to understand the whole safe space, third space, reach out, that's it. It wasn't a 1997, circa 2014. It's from Imam Al-Ghazali. That's it right there. But shouldn't we? But you're dealing with girls without hijab and boys that don't have beards and people that are drinking and clubbing. But shouldn't we? Yeah. We should shut the door of the masjid in their face. Shut the door of the community in their face and say, what? You done messed up. You can't come back. That's going to be our response to that. That's our da'wah, right? Door is shut. Masjid's locked. Go to hell. That's a lot of what's happening. What he's saying is what? No. Number one, love them. Number two, miss them. Number three, go get them. Are you all listening to me? Because real preachers go to where sinners are. Real preachers go to where sinners are. It's easy to preach from behind the safety of your pulpit. It's easy to preach from behind your prayer rug. That's easy. But it's difficult to preach if you go on where what? Where sinners are. May Allah make it easy for us. Now, some of us may say, but that was during the time of Imam Al-Ghazali. Times have changed. One of my teachers, and you can verify this. His name was Abu Ahmed. And his teacher, his student, was named Sheikh Salman Arrada. Sheikh Salman Arrada. He lives in a place called Sheikh Zuwaid, near El Arish in northern Sinai. I can give you the address if you wanted the phone number. You can call them and verify this story. It's 15, 20 minutes from the borders of Palestine, Gaza, near Rafah. His name is Sheikh what? Salman. Are you all listening? And his teacher was named what? Sidi Bu Ahmed. When Sidi Bu Ahmed came to this area, it was a barren desert. And the people there were dope dealers. They sold narcotics. And Sidi Bu Ahmed grew up in Jerusalem, but he comes to make da'wah in this particular area in northern Sinai. And they're Sinai Bedouins, but they Sinai Bedouin dope dealers. And the people, he came and started wanting to engage them and make da'wah to them, but they would invite him to his house because they're Bedouins, and the Bedouins are very generous people. So they say, come, mensef, right? 2 people, a tray this big. So he says, come to our house. And the sheikh didn't want to eat food that was bought with money from drugs. So he found himself in a conflict. He said, if I don't go, they're never going to listen to me. But if I do go, I'm going to have haram in my belly. What do you think he did? He went to their houses, ate their food, and would go home and vomit every night. Because he didn't want to have food in his belly that was haram. But he didn't want to refuse their food. Right now, you can go there. It's peach trees and olive trees and schools. Because they all made tawbah at his hand. Right? This is historically documented. I know the people. I know some of the people whose fathers made tawbah at the hand of Sidi Bu Ahmed because he would go eat their food, go home and vomit, and they all became his students. Imam Abu Hanifa, Allah be all pleased with him, the first prison chaplain in Islam. He had a neighbor named Muhammad. And Muhammad used to play the oud all night long and sing. Right? And the song he used to sing was called Daya'uni, which is poor me, they neglected me. And he plays the oud, which is basically the lute, the Arabic guitar. Daya'uni. He'd get drunk and party all night, play the lute, sing, keep the imam up. Now hold on. His neighbor, but what was Imam Abu Hanifa doing? 40 years. He prayed the morning prayer with the wudu from Isha, which means what? He took naps, micro naps in the morning, but he stayed up for 40 years, all night long praying. Muhammad next door doing what? Daya'uni. One day, Imam Abu Hanifa didn't hear the music. So what did he do? What would you do, honestly? Alhamdulillah. Finally. He went out and said, what happened? Where's Muhammad? They said they locked him up. He's at the prison. That's why I call him the first prison chaplain. You know what he did? Went to the prison. He said, do you have Muhammad ibn so-and-so in custody now? They said, who's asking? He said, Abu Hanifa Nu'man. They said, who? Abu Hanifa. He said, you Abu Hanifa? They said, yeah. He said, you're asking about Muhammad? They said, yeah. He said, not only are we going to release him, but we're going to release everybody named Muhammad in custody because you came to ask about him tonight. A true story. So they released him, and they released the other people named Muhammad. Now here's the awkward moment where your neighbor, Imam Al-Azam, who you've been keeping up all night long, came down, what? To the joint to bail you out. And you've been keeping him up all the right? You bothered him while he up in tahajjud, and you, daya'uni. Muhammad walks up to Imam Abu Hanifa. You know what he said to him? Daya'anak. He said, have we neglected you? Because the song was what? You've neglected me. He said, Daya'anak. Have we neglected you? And they say he became his student. So until you can make the frat party next door, you can make da'wah to the frat party next door, and until your neighbor who's doing whatever, until you can reach out to them, we're not on anything. And the saddest part is, most of the bad Muslims, people in our families. Was that too honest for you guys? Anybody got bad Muslims in their family? Don't raise your hand. Assad was like, no, I mean, they're our family members. Let's just be honest, right? Or our friends. It's not about like, oh, the bad Muslims in this side of town. There's people who got struggles, man. And you should love them enough to miss them, go after them, embrace them, tell them I still love you. You know what I'm saying? Like Amir Suleiman said, not I love you if, I love you when, I love you but, I love you but. Just I love you. May Allah help us all. Maryam.
And on that note, shouldn't the first thought be, is it myself, not who is the bad Muslim, but reflecting inwardly?
It's very interesting that the scholar said that when we go into uzla, isolation, what's our intention? When you go isolate yourself, you go to retreat, what's your intention? Honestly, get away from the people. But the scholar said when we go into isolation, our intention should be what? To suffice the people from our evil. Be what? Give the people a break, right? I'm going to give you all a break. I'm going to the mountains for a few days. Enjoy your time. I'll be back. I'm sorry, right? So that when you're in isolation, you don't get arrogant, right? You don't become vainglorious and say, what? Oh, I'm in isolation and retreat away from all the bad people. So the short answer to your question, Maryam, would be yes. May Allah make it easy for us. Now, I think we need to take like a stretch break. It's not in the schedule, but I think I stole one of your breaks. Help me out here. What is it? We'll take a 5-minute break. We'll come right back at 3:45. It's a 7-minute break according to that clock. And when that clock says 3:45, we'll be right back. Just stretch, take a breather, and come right back. Bismillah. So the kind of moral of the story: tenderness, consolation, benevolence are more effective in recalling and inspiring repentance. He mentions also that when someone apologizes to you, you should accept it, whether you believe it or not to be true. Employing the 70 excuses, and obviously that is very difficult. And we must distinguish between being humble and being humiliated. No one's to say that we should allow ourselves to be taken advantage of. The Prophet said a believer is not struck from the same snake hole twice. So if someone's done you wrong, my mother told me when I was young, if someone does you wrong once, shame on them. If they do it twice, shame on you. But when someone apologizes, you accept it, whether you believe them to be true or not. And there are beautiful hadiths to that regard. If we employed the 70 excuses, right, we often would find enough reason to forgive people. But I rarely get past 2. 70 excuses mean if they do something wrong, try to make 70 excuses for them. And I also want to emphasize here that does not in any way, shape, or form mean that we should be silenced in the face of any type of abuse, whether that be verbal, physical, sexual, or otherwise. Make 70 excuses. If someone's committed a crime, they've committed a crime, and it's necessary that be redressed. This is about normal situations with not extenuating circumstances. The 6th duty is prayer, praying for them during their life and after their death. And to clarify one of the questions that one of the students asked, we're told that when a believer prays for a believer in their absence, the angels will say amen, and you have the likes of that. Meaning that the prayer for a believer in their absence is answered. It's like if I go home tonight and pray for you, and you're not there, you obviously can't hear me. I'm not FaceTiming you like, hey, I wanted to make dua for you, so let me Snapchat it. But like I'm actually just making dua for you and you're not there, praying for you, it's guaranteed to be answered, God willing. And you have the likes of it. So, if you pray for them that Allah bless them with this or bless them with that, you have that as well. During their life and after their death. And he mentions the hadith to that end. And then the 7th duty is loyalty and sincerity. Loyalty, steadfastness in love, maintaining it to death with your brother and with his family after he dies. The Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, said, if you wanted to keep ties with your father after they've passed, or your mother, then reach out to someone they loved. So like if you knew that someone had a kinship bond or friendship bond with your parents, to reach out to them after your parents' passing is a way to renew ties with your parents even after their passing. And so loyalty during life and after passing. And he mentions a hadith of the 7 who were shaded on the day of judgment, when there is no shade except his shade, and that are 2 people who love each other for God's sake, and they're constant therein, whether together or apart. And he mentions the fact that Satan takes delight in loyalty being broken. So when you hear forces that are calling you to break ties of loyalty to one another, be careful of the voice of your enemy. And he also mentions that affection cannot coexist with envy. So if you feel like hasad, you feel envy toward the person, you should do some heart work and try to get rid of that, because you can't have affection and love if that exists. Loyalty, he says, includes not listening to gossip about your friends. So just saying, miss me with it. Someone comes and starts gossiping, miss me with it. And just not, being loyal enough that you're not going to listen to someone talk about your friend, and then because what happens if your friend finds out you listened to that and didn't stop them or didn't say anything, like, man, with friends like that, who needs enemies? Be wary of those who pretend to be dear to their friend to escape suspicion, but then speak in order to convey things about their friend which disturb the heart. Meaning that you come and say things like the person came and someone brings bad news to you about something someone else said. It's one thing to caution someone, say, be careful, Abdullah wants to kill you. We heard about our earlier example. That's different than being, hey, Abdul Razak, did you hear that Abdullah said this? It's almost like you're doing Satan's work for him, bringing those type of things. And like the Imam Al-Shafi'i said, "Men yanqulu ilayka yanqulu anka." Someone who brings news to you about other people will bring news about you to other people. Another lesson I learned when I was a child, An elder told me, if I plot with you to steal his wallet, what does that mean? I will plot with him to steal yours. So be careful. You know, people who write, what, they like the mailman, always got a message. Be careful, because pretty soon you won't be the envelope. The 8th duty, informality. You can look at page 78. Relieving the person from discomfort or inconvenience. So not making a person uncomfortable. And also not discomforting them with things that are uncomfortable or awkward for them. So if you know that you could avoid an awkward situation, or not put them in an awkward situation, try to avoid that. And trying to not burden people with your burdens. So here, look y'all, this is the bidirectionality. I should be, if you ask me to do something, I welcome it. And don't see it as a burden but a blessing. But I don't say that applies both ways. No, when I think about the other direction, I say I don't want to burden you. And this is where we shift the idea of rights and responsibilities and say I'm going to fulfill my responsibilities, and by doing that I will have fulfilled your rights. Instead of demanding my rights, you demand your rights, and neither of us fulfill responsibility. So the point being that if I fulfill my responsibility, then I will be lightening your burden, but I should not demand that of you, as saying that it's my right. I have a right to do that because it's not looking at it correctly. Subhanallah. The author says, seek fellowship, and the author meaning Imam Al-Ghazali, seek fellowship only with one who will repent for you if you sin, apologize for you if you do wrong, bear your burden for you, and take care of his own. Bear your burden for you and take care of his own. This is the principle of what? Don't say that about your father. I'm the one who ran him over. You guys remember the story? You all with me? Hey, and so, Laura, when you talk about being able to count them on one hand, one of my friends said to our teacher, he said, Sheikh, I feel like I could count my friends on one hand. He went like this. Actually, he did the other way. He went like this. He said, if you have that, you should be thankful. Right? In other words, right? So if you can say, I have a friend, right? I have a friend. That's a lot. But we've kind of leveled the playing field to like, we're all BFF, right? My kids were singing a song last night about hating Barney and killing purple dinosaurs. I don't know where they learned it from. I don't know if you guys, if you know that song, we should maybe talk afterward. But I hate you, you hate me, let's all go kill Barney. Something, 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 kill purple dinosaurs. Like little violent little Muslims, right? I don't know. Someone killing purple dinosaurs. Violent little Muslims. Miskeen Barney, man, he's just trying to say, honey, what? He on some Rodney King type stuff, man. Y'all trying to hate on Barney, man. SubhanAllah. Miskeen Barney. I got Barney's back, though, I'm telling you. Now, he said, the least of degrees is to look with the eye of equality, placing yourself on equal footing. Perfection lies in seeking the greater merit in your brother. And so this is always seeing your brothers is greater than you. Always seeing your brothers is greater than you. And in healthy communities, that's what you feel like. You feel like, the whole community are my masters because I want to be a servant. And so I want to, and especially if I'm going to be a leader, then I've got to be a servant leader. I've got to be a leader that's rooted in service, not a leader that's rooted in being served. That's how you know a fake leader. All right, Allah save us from that. We're supposed to be servant leaders where we and they said, Sayyidul Qawm Khadimuhum, because a people's leader is their servant. So in healthy communities, we look at one another as what? Antum sadati, you're all my masters. You're all my foremost. You all have rank over me. I'm the least, I'm the lowest. And we all look above. And like they say, water only flows in which direction? Down. So if you look at others as better than you, then you're able to benefit. And as Emerson said, every man I meet is my superior in something. In that I learn of him. Every man I meet is my superior in something. So everyone's better than me at something. So you say, but no, what if they this? And as the Arabs say, خُذِ الْحِكْمَةَ مِنْ أَفْوَاهِ الْمَجَانِينَ. Take wisdom from the mouth of insane people. Because sometimes insane people can say things that you can't say. It was a trip. I was in the Mission District one day walking in this coffee shop. And this lady walked by and she was ostensibly not well. And she was ostensibly looked like she was maybe displaced. And she walked by and true story. She walked by, she goes, you're a liar. You're a liar. You claim that he's one and you love him, you're a liar, right? I said, SubhanAllah. I was like, la ilaha illallah. Allah just made her say that for me. I was like, I'm sorry, Allah, I'm a liar, right? You know what I'm saying? Astaghfirullah. But, sometimes they don't have a filter, so sometimes people say things. So even people that you may look at outwardly as what? You may look, oh, they're not well, or they're this, subhanAllah. In some way, they're better than you. In some way, they're better than you. Naam, may Allah make it easy. Naam, and then he mentions also in this idea of informality, employing all of your faculties. And here's where we can look at implementing. So sight, looking at your brother with affection while turning a blind eye to their faults. So what do we do with our eyes? We look with mahabba and love and muwaddah, with affection, and we close our eyes when there's a fault. So if you could possibly look away, if you could possibly not see it. And it's a beautiful dua one of my teachers taught me. Oh Allah, do not show us other people's faults. Allahumma la turina min uyubin nas. We don't want to see people's faults. Naam. Listening to their words with pleasure and not interrupting them when they speak. So like you want to listen to them pleasurably. That's with hearing. Speech, do not raise your voice against them or use your words to make them feel uncomfortable. Right? So when you say things, it should be things that make them comfortable. It's narrated that the Prophet ﷺ said in an athar, that if a person causes delight to another person, Allah will create an angel that worships him in their name and will testify to his oneness. And when that person dies, the angel will come to their grave and say, I am the surur, I am the delight that you caused so-and-so. Today I will keep you company in your loneliness, and also intercede for the person on the day of judgment. If you cause another person delight, Allah will create an angel that worships him in your name until the day of judgment. Right? So when we say things that make other people happy, and this is good so that if we do want to joke, we make niyyah. When we have intention to joke and chill with one another, our intention is what? إدخال السرور على المسلم مع أنه بعضنا قد يبالغ في ذلك. نعم. Hands. Do not hold back when you can assist your brother. The hands are capable of much aid. So you should be a yad. And one of the words for meanings of yad in Arabic is that your power. You aid your brother, that you assist them. And then feet, you use them to walk behind them like a follower, or in front when you're sent to the front. Stand for them when they approach you, and sit only when they are seated. You know, like some of my teachers, subhanAllah, they always stand for guests. I came into the gathering of the Sayyid al-Habib Umar al-Jailani. They call him the Shafi'i of the Arabian Peninsula. He's one of the last living great scholars in Arabia. He has a class on Bukhari on Sunday nights. And you walk into the gathering and it's like all of the scholars of Mecca, and he's like one of the leading scholars of Mecca, and he's sitting in the front. And I come into the gathering and I met him in Malaysia. We stayed in the same hotel, and unfortunately when I was in Malaysia, they made me speak after him, which is like you never put, the scholar goes last, and because of like this whole unfortunate organizing, they made me speak after the sheikh, and I was shaking. So I went to him and I begged him to forgive me. I said, Sheikh, I'm sorry. I just considered a sign at the end of time that the likes of me would be asked to speak after you, and I'm dead serious, like I apologize. He's like, no, speak, it's great, it's fine. And then I spoke, and so we had this bond. Anyways, I come to Mecca to visit him at his class and at this big gathering, right? This creme de la creme of Mecca. And I walk in and I sit in the back of the room. He's like, no, you have to come sit in the front. And I'm really like embarrassed because he's asking me to sit in the front of the class. And as I walked by to kiss his hand and greet him, he said, سامحني ما قمت بس أثناء الدرس ما أقوم. He said, I'm really sorry for not standing for you when you came, but it's in the middle of the class and I don't want to hurt. Creme de la creme de la creme. And here's little old broken old me, right? And he said, I'm sorry for not standing for you. He's outwardly saying it, right? But then you have people that say, well, I ain't standing for you. Who are you? Right? I'm Muslim. I'm too Muslim. The Prophet, when the man walks in, he says, Qumuni sayyidikum. Stand for your master. So the point is, when you can stand for people, makes them feel comfortable. The Prophet, when Fatima would come, he would stand for her, radiallahu anha, to make a statement of his love for her. And that was well known. And he mentions also that sit only when they are seated, meaning make sure that they're comfortable. Make sure that they're comfortable. As we end, 5 things you shouldn't refuse. What are they? 5 things you shouldn't refuse. Pillow. Who said pillow? Where'd you learn that from? Here. Pillow. So we were going to go the other way, but you went straight for the pillow. Right? So if someone gives you a pillow, you shouldn't refuse it. It's not sunnah to refuse a pillow. As you all know that? Right, so because the person wants you to be comfortable. Because if it's like, no, you take it, I take it, have a pillow fight. Right? Someone gives you a pillow, it's sunnah to take it. What else? Milk. What if you're vegan? Khalas, don't drink the milk if you're vegan. Right? Ask them to give you almond milk or something. But right, it's not sunnah to refuse milk. Right? Because the Prophet used to drink milk and he loved milk. Right? What else? Sweets you shouldn't refuse. What else? Adrian? Jamil? Meat. So now you have Muslims have a justification for their carnivorous endeavors, right? Again, we say that with all due respect to any brothers or sisters that are vegan or vegetarian, but if someone gives you meat, it's better to take it, it's sunnah to take it. And then the last one was what? Who knows the last one? Perfume, right? Unless it's going to be that, going to give you a headache, 3 day long, have to go to the ER, gasoline, stuff the brothers be trying to put on. Aki, sunnah. And you're like, I know, but I can't breathe, right? Nah, but in general, it's not sunnah to refuse. Perfume, we stopped just on time. Technically, I stole 3 minutes of your life, and I apologize for doing that. It's now 4:03. If anybody wants to stay for questions, I'll be happy to stay. Those of you who plan on leaving at the completion of the class, we're now finished. And I pray that Allah let us benefit from our gathering, make us from those who listen to speech and follow the best of it, and pray that Allah Ta'ala enable us, Allah, even with this little brief examination of what it means to be brothers and sisters that you give us from the realities of brotherhood and sisterhood for your sake. Bring to life, Ya Rab, our hearts, and bring to life our community, and make us agents of change and agents of love in the community, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Innaka waliyu dhalik wal qadir alayh. We ask you to be well pleased with Imam Al-Ghazali and all of our teachers and all of our scholars and all of those who taught us, and make us better brothers and sisters to one another, and better husbands to our wives, and better wives to our husbands, better parents to our children, better children to our parents, better neighbors to our neighbors, and better members of society to our society, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Innaka waliyu dhalik wal qadir alayh. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa sallam. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.